The Hedgeless Horseman here again. This will be part 3 of my Egina series, and I thought I'd start with the genesis of a lot of the gold in the Pilbara, or what that genesis is believed to be. So this is from the Commodity Discovery Fund presentation, where Quinton laid out basically Novo's theory of where most of the gold come from, and it started with an oil-enriched sediment package that later on got cooked, sheared, and metamorphized, and a bunch of or numerous lode golds, hard rock lode targets formed, and probably remobilized a lot of the gold found in the gold-enriched sediment packages. So there are, as has been stated a couple of times, there are countless quartz veins all through the Pilbara, and I've seen some of them myself. And the Gray has been finding a lot of near-surface lode gold targets along these 100-kilometer fault zones, or close to 100-kilometer or shear zones. And you can see this is the Egina area. There's a bunch of prospects, hard rock prospects, all over the place. And later on, all this got eroded down and left a lag gravel deposit, which is the conglomerates found underneath Mount Rowe. So let's switch to the mapping tool. The brown unit here is the gray sediment package. What remains of it today, it might have covered a much broader area. I don't know. I mean, these are granites, for example, and they have lower gravity. So probably if there were sediments here and there and every other place, they probably got eroded first. But this part of the gray sediment package remains today, and if you look at the gravity profile, you can basically see the outline of the ancient sediment package. You see how this basically follows this light green or turquoise color, and here we have the granites. And they show a completely different reading, and this is basically where the sediment package stops, right next to the granites. And this whole Malina basin probably goes for a long way undercover. This is the Fortescue group cover of rocks, so it's basically continues something like this. Another sign that there were probably a lot of quartz veins popping up through these sediments is if you use the quartz filter. Takes some time to load these maps. So, as you can see, there are quite high readings, especially in the Egina area. And the high readings basically stop where the granites starts popping up. So I mean, for whatever reason, there seems to be a lot of quartz on top of the Malina formation, and if all that quartz belongs or was sourced from the Malina formation, or a lot of it eroded from older I guess hard rock targets that might have been found on top of the granites and stuff like that. I don't know, but you can basically see that there's a lot of quartz, and the highest concentration seems to be confined to where the Malina Basin outcrops today. So I guess that's a good sign that there was a bunch of these load gold veins in this part of the Pilbara, especially the Egina area. And now if we go on to the more modern aged lag gravel deposits, if you use the state regolith geology filter, you can see basically where there's cover rock today. I'm just gonna zoom in a bit. That's the white stuff, basically, where there's accumulation of topsoil. And if we then use the ferrous iron index, which I believe might be a tool to track where there have been accumulations of heavy materials. You can see that the highest readings in this part of the Pilbara is found where there is regolith mapped, where there is basically loose material on that's been gathering. So I take that as a good sign. So we have a bunch of quartz readings, a bunch of high quartz readings in on top of the Malina Basin sediments, and especially in the Egina area. And we also have very high iron ferrous iron index readings where there's basically topsoil mapped or regolith mapped. You can see it here, large parts here, large parts here, large parts here. This is the Egina area, the Egina mining lease where the trench is, and this is the swale I showed in the first video. But you can see there's a lot of areas with high iron index readings, and they all are basically located at where there is mapped regolith or loose cover rock. So I take that as a good sign. And let's switch again to we can look at the regolith readings, but they are a bit scrambled if I remember correctly. It's not as easy to make anything out of this, but I guess you could say that the areas with darker colors are still coinciding with where there's regolith mapped, which is, I mean, shouldn't be a surprise since they basically measure or they are used to track the same thing, basically regolith or topsoil or loose gravels. So that makes sense. And let's look at the quartz readings again. Here you can see it even clearer that basically the Egina area and to the north and this part of the central Pilbara area has very heavy quartz readings, and I thought it would be interesting to see if The iron readings differed a bit with the quartz readings since they have different gravities. So, I mean, quartz is lighter, and potentially a lot of these high readings is just basically quartz sand or something. So, I would assume that the heaviest materials would not end up at the same area when erosion and wave action and wind and stuff like that happen, because they would be dropped off at different places. So let's take a look at if we use the ferrous iron index. As you can see, you have like a trend here, and here's Egina, but to the northeast is a big blob of very high ferrous iron index readings. So perhaps the quartz readings is a good indication of there having been a lot of quartz gold and lode veins that have eroded, like the Gray's finding. I mean, they're finding stuff like this all over the place, just a bunch of veins outcropping at the surface, and here you can see their projection of total endowment. And I mean, based on the theory behind, let's see if I can find it. Based on Novo's theory, a bunch of the, or at least in this area, 20 meters or so of the Malina Basin also eroded, and you can see here local gold-bearing quartz vein and shear zones. So, I mean, the bulk of the gold is probably from the original Mount Roe conglomerates, or the oldest 2.8 or 3 billion year old Archean lag gravel deposit, but that also got enriched by additional erosion of the lode gold deposits around the Pilbara. So I think that's a reason for there being a lot of quartz in this area, and hopefully that's also a sign that this area in particular was very well endowed with load-bearing or gold-bearing lode deposits. And as you can see here, these are a bunch of prospects belonging to the Gray, which will basically come up to surface. And this is also the area where there's very high quartz readings. So I think that that's a good sign, and I don't know what this area will turn out to be, but this area is first of all very large, and Novo owns most of it through their own staking and deal with the Gray. And in this area is where you find a bunch of hard rock gold targets as well. So I think that's a good sign. And there's also, for example, we have this from the Gray, their Blue Moon prospect, which is, I just gotta find it, which is this dot, I think. Basically this is the this is the Blue Moon prospect. Let's look at it again. So you can see this white patch. That's this patch. And if you can see here, prospector activity. So they've been prospecting here, and I know this channel is where they found a bunch of nuggets. And then there's gold anomalies all over the place, and also in the Hedgeless area, which is this area. And as you can see, it looks like a topographic high. So this area has high readings from soil sampling, and this area also Langenbeck, and that's basically here. So I kind of assume that the areas with, let's say, high iron index readings is mostly areas where the topsoil is thick enough that you wouldn't get that good soil sampling results from sampling basically the topsoil. As we saw in the Fernan McMahon mining lease, they were mining stuff that didn't really show high iron index readings, and the regolith ratio was also pretty, I guess, low. So they were probably, the prospectors probably found and mined areas where the regolith wasn't that thick. And as you can see here it gets thicker, but the area that they primarily were mining, that's this area and up here a bit. So I mean, here you have a channel, for example. That's was the very rich area from the that's this one. I don't remember how many ounces the prospector found, but a lot of ounces. So it's obviously channelized, and probably it's like that in places around Egina as well. But this prospecting area, for example, coincides pretty well with semi-high readings of the regolith ratio, but primarily very high ferrous index ratios. And they prospected this area too. So and you can see there's seems to be a lot of heavy material here as well. But these areas with high soil anomalies, they have very low iron index reading. So again, I think that these areas where the topsoil is so thin, because that's basically the edge of the erosional front, I think that's the easiest areas for, you know, the run-of-the-mill prospector to find gold, because as the Fernan McMahon guys did, they only basically scraped the top, and they stopped where it got deeper, and where there was, I guess, a saprolite cap to the oldest lag gravels. So I think basically they've been scraping, a lot of prospectors have been scraping the surface, and that's also why the higher soil readings from the gray is around areas where there's been less erosion, because these are probably channels and areas with more topsoil perhaps, and where there are more undisturbed lag gravel deposits on the bottom. But here at least they've basically detected and prospected some of the some area of where there's a lot of iron. So I mean, it's not impossible that some of these areas got or saw newer, more recent erosion that basically made the lag gravel deposits surface, because it's hard to know how old the cover rock is. I mean, as you know, sand blows back and forth, so this area might have been exposed recently, but it still has high readings, so it's easier to find the actual the actual gold. And I mean, it was kind of a big deal for De Grey, because they staked this Blue Moon prospect because they found a bunch of nuggets, and the prospectors that had been there had plucked up like 1,500 ounces of gold or something. I mean, that's from a relatively small area, so it's a bit interesting. So I think that I think this is still valid, and that most of the activity has been where there are more disturbed areas of lag gravel accumulations, and basically the topsoil isn't that thick, and I have no idea what this is. This might be an area where there's been very heavy accumulation of heavy materials. No, but anyway, I think this was interesting, and I just wanted to show you that it seems to kind of work here as well, in terms of regolith and iron index readings coinciding with prospector activity, and this area where they found a topsoil anomaly coincides with low readings, like in the Fornavik-Mayon mining, Egina mining lease area, where I guess the gold was more exposed and closer to the surface, while down here it might be covered with more cover rock, so prospectors wouldn't find it. That's it. Thanks for listening. Bye.